there's two different methodologies that will be used by the school. So first is the federal methodology, which is the most common. So this one's going to be used at the majority of schools. So in the examples I just showed, Bradley and Clarion, they use the federal methodology. The other one is going to be the institutional methodology. This one is used at more of your elite schools like Northwestern that I showed you. The reason that I bring it up and why is there a difference, right? It matters on what they're looking at, because if you're going to try to implement some strategies to help reduce that overall EFC, you have to know which methodology your students are going to be using. So one thing will help in one area, one will not. So for example, the federal methodology does not consider non-custodial parent assets. It does not assess small business value like we just talked about. So if you do what's legally required and make that part of your business, they're not going to include that on those questions. It also does not assess any home equity that you might have. And finally, it does not assess sibling assets, which you might say to yourself, Matt, are you insane? Why would anyone worry about sibling assets? Well, there's a reason for it, and it's coming up, and we'll talk about it in just a minute. And there also is some student income protection allowance. So your student is able to make up to $6,667 per year without it impacting the FAFSA and then going into negatively impact that EFC. Now, the institutional methodology, basically just throw everything out that I just said, because it kind of does what it wants. So it may assess non-custodial parent assets. Home equity is often assessed. Sibling assets are assessed. Any business value that you'd have is also assessed, and there is no student income protection allowance. So every dollar that the student earns goes directly on that FAFSA. So I'm not trying to say one's better than the other. There's different. And unfortunately, you're looking at some of these terms that I'm using. You're like, is, often, may. It's like, give me an answer, Matt. But I don't have one for you, because all of the institutional methodologies can look and pick and choose what they want to look at. So you might have two institutional methodology schools that look at different things. So it's really up to the school. So it's really difficult. But once you know which one you're going for, or which methodology the schools are using, you can kind of figure out which one of these strategies might help the most. So just a quick example, if you're using federal methodology, you might say, oh, I can pay down home equity. So any assets that I might have, we can put it into the home, and then they won't necessarily be showing on the FAFSA. That will work for the federal methodology. However, on the institutional methodology, they will assess that home equity, or I should say, they may assess that home equity. So you may have just gone through things and moved funding around and paid things down. That isn't really going to be helping you in the long run. So you just really want to make sure you know which one you're looking at.
Matt, when the parents talk to the financial aid office, when they visit either in person or virtually, should they come with a lot of questions?
Yes, absolutely. So there's nothing I love more than when I'm on campus and someone's on a tour and they're coming with some questions for me. The reason is some of the things that I've already talked about here, right? So you're not going to be able, that you might be able to find some of these numbers like, what percentage of demonstrated financial need are they going to fill for you? But what they're often not going to tell you, unless you go in and ask, is exactly how they're going to fill that demonstrated financial need. So are they going to be giving any sort of gift aid that's going to be helping reduce those costs? Or is it all just going to be student loans and parent plus loans? You know, that doesn't really help you a whole lot in the end. So that's the key, is to determine how they're filling that need, and making sure that you're doing that so you can maximize that against other schools, right? So you can take that and shop that information saying, hey, they're filling this amount. Can you do better? As long as you're comparing an apples to apples school. So it gives you a little bit of an option to kind of go through and say, does this work for me? Does it not work for me? And really give you an idea of what they're going to be applying and how they apply it. So unless you ask, they're not always going to be, they're not hiding the information from you. But if you don't ask for it, they're not going to be willingly giving it up sometimes.